Good morning YouTube, I'm Shelley Darlington. Welcome to another video. Today's topic is hip dips, or better known as violin hips. The reason I'm making a video on this is just because I get asked about it all the time. There's so many of you ladies that want to get rid of your hip dips and you want to know how. But before I explain everything to you, I'm in the middle of making my berry breakfast bake. So I'm gonna make this before I head off to the gym later, where I'm gonna show you a full workout on how to target your hip dip. So check out my berry breakfast bake. Okay, so now that berry bake is in the oven, and while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to explain to you what hip dips are. Although I'm going to show you a workout that is meant to minimize or target that area, I want to make it really clear that hip dips are not an actual area of the body that you can fix completely with exercise. And that's because it's not actually a muscle, it comes down to bone structure. Some body types have hip dips, others don't. Typically, if you have a very athletic body, meaning you have quite narrow hips and a straight up and down shape, you probably won't have that much of a hip dip. However, if you have wider hips, then you probably will have more pronounced hip dips. And basically a hip dip is just the indentation in between your hip bone and the top of your thigh. I don't know why, but a lot of you girls really hate them and want to get rid of them on your body. Firstly, before we go any further, it's completely normal to have hip dips, and if you have them, it doesn't mean that you are fat, it doesn't mean that you are ugly, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your body. It is so normal, and like I said, it's all because it comes down to the shape of your body, and more importantly, the shape of your bone structure, which is your skeleton. You either have it or you don't. You can't get rid of them completely with exercise because you can't train away your bone structure. But what you can do is minimize the appearance of them. Bear with me for a moment. We're just going to go through and explain the actual anatomy of a hip dip. Now, this is all to do with your pelvis and how your femur bone sits within it. So your femur is your thigh bone. So if you have a wide pelvis, imagine that your pelvis sits here. Now, if you're at more of an angle, you have more of a space in between the top of your femur and the top of your pelvis. If you have less of an angle, then you can see here that you'll have less of a space in between. And this is where the indentation, the hip dips come from. There are a few muscles that run along through that area, and you'll see a lot of fitness people telling you to train all sorts of muscles to get rid of this hip dip by filling it out, by growing your muscles. This is not exactly accurate. I've found that there's two different opposing band camps here when it comes to which muscles you should be targeting. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell you that you shouldn't be targeting any of these muscles. Now you know what a hip dip is. You understand the bone structure and why you get a hip dip. I'm going to explain to you the muscles that surround that area. You have the gluteus medius and the gluteus minimus, the gluteus maximus being the largest, biggest of the three. So that's your glutes. And the gluteus medius and minimus, they sit at the upper outer part of your glutes, which is just above your hip dip. The other muscles below the hip dip are the muscles of your quadriceps, your thighs. Right in the middle of the hip dip, you have a few tiny little muscles. The most significant one that you'll hear is the TFL. That TFL is what most fitness people are going to tell you to target. And I'm going to tell you why that's completely wrong. The TFL is not a muscle that you can target and grow, and that's because that muscle is really a functional muscle. It's a tiny muscle, and it really is just to stabilize your hips so that you can do things like walk and squat and jump and run and all those wonderful things that you want to do as a human being. I'm telling you now, if you just smashed your TFL in the gym and did all these isolation exercises to activate it and grow it, you're just probably going to irritate it and you'll end up with some sort of dysfunction, getting hip pains or knee pains or lower back pains. So my advice, don't target the TFL. On the other band camp, you'll hear people say that you need to target your gluteus medius. And while I don't think there's anything wrong with targeting your gluteus medius, in fact, I think it's quite important if you're looking for overall glute development that you do target this muscle. However, the gluteus medius, as I explained, it sits above your hip dip. Anything that grows your gluteus medius is just going to accentuate your already there hip dip. And again, some people are going to tell you that you should just grow the top of your quadriceps. But again, same thing. You're just going to grow those areas and it's just going to further accentuate your hip dip, which is the opposite of what you're trying to do here. So my approach is a bit different. What you really want to do is just target the glutes in general, overall growth of your glute muscles. So that's all three muscles. That's your gluteus maximus, your gluteus medius, and your gluteus minimus. And the best exercises is the king of all exercises, the hip thrust. By doing these exercises that I'm about to show you in this workout, you're going to grow your glutes. They're going to look fuller, they're going to look rounder. That's where you want to fill out that whole hip area. And more precisely, you want to target the outer edges of your gluteus maximus. That's the outermost part of your glutes, and that's what's going to give you that nice round shape that you're after. So it's not about necessarily minimizing your hip dips, because you can't really do that with exercise, because that's just anatomically how you're built. And isolating little funny little muscles isn't going to help either. You just want to go for overall glute growth. And one last point before we get into this workout, because this is the most important. The only thing that is really truly going to minimize your hip dip is losing body fat. For us women, I've mentioned this in previous videos, women generally tend to hold body fat at the top of their thighs, which is kind of just underneath their glutes. The other area is the muffin top, or just below the belly, and it's totally normal, and it's just where we hold body fat as women. It's where I tend to store most body fat too. And so the only way to really minimize your hip dips is to lose body fat in those areas. But regardless of what people say, you cannot just spot reduce fat. You cannot just go, I only want to lose it from that area. Typically, when you lose body fat, wherever you tend to store it most, it's going to be the last place you see it go. It's very, very difficult to completely get rid of body fat in those areas, and the only thing that's going to get rid of body fat in those areas is by cleaning up your diet. It's got actually very little to do with exercise. So although this workout that I'm about to show you is fantastic for overall glute development and building that amazing shape, really, if you're looking to lose body fat, you have to clean up your diet. So I just want that to be the lasting note before we move on, because really that's the answer to what you're looking for. It's losing body fat and growing muscle in that area. All right, so that's everything I'm going to say on the matter. Let's get straight into this workout. I hope you enjoy it. I'll catch you on the other side. Okay, here we go. So I'm just warming up here with some walking lunges, nice wide strides, so that I can really stretch my glutes and my hamstrings. And now we're moving on to a single leg squat, and I'm focusing on explosive movement, so really pushing off that standing foot, and my butt barely touches the bench. And now we're going into some glute activation with the band, so this is a standing hip abduction. I really find that this targets my glute med and my outer glute max as well. This is just a lying variation, and I focus on squeezing the glutes first and then lifting my legs, so really concentrated movements. This looks a bit crazy, but it's amazing. Grab yourself a Bosu ball, lift your legs up, squeeze those glutes and push out on that band. This will really hit your outer glutes. And so does this exercise. So band around your heels, put your hips just over the edge of a flat bench, toes out nice and wide, and pivot on those toes, push the heels out, keep your legs straight, and you will really feel this in your outer part of your glute max. I love this exercise. Now we're moving on to the abductor machine.
This looks crazy, but it's amazing. Trust me on this one. Hips go right into the bench, and keep the weight super, super light. So be careful of your knees with this exercise. You're gonna push from the inner part of your feet, squeeze your glutes. This hits the outer glute max like nothing else. I love this. Now we're going into a single leg hip thrust. This is really just to get the glutes firing before we go into a full barbell hip thrust. As you can see here, I'm only doing partial reps, so I'm not going all the way down, but I am getting full hip extension and really squeezing my glutes hard. I did about 15 reps here, and then for the last 5 reps, I just held it at the top and pulsed. So nice, tiny little pulses. This will burn. Now we're going to move on to a Bulgarian split squat using a flat bench. I'm just doing body weight here to warm up. Feel free to stay here because this does challenge your stability as well. Otherwise, feel free to grab a barbell or dumbbells. But notice how I'm really pushing off my front foot, because that's what's going to activate the glute of the front foot. We are not pushing off the back leg. And finally, we're moving on to the last exercise. This is a side lunge. Again, you can do this body weight or banded. I prefer to do it with a barbell for added intensity, but that lunging leg is the one that's doing the work. So as I lunge down, I'm pushing off that foot, pushing myself back up to standing. That's going to activate your glute medius and the outer parts of your glute maximus.
There you go, that was the full workout to target your hip dips or violin hips. But before we go, I just want you to remember that having hip dips is completely and utterly normal. I have hip dips, so do millions of other girls out there. No matter how much exercise you do or how much weight you lose, if you have more of an angle on your thigh bone, you will have hip dips. I want you to realize just how unimportant this is. Nitpicking at your body parts is never going to make you happy. Of course, I've just showed you how to change something if you're not happy with it. This one being hip dips, but this goes for any sort of fad that's out there. Thigh gaps were a thing not long ago. There's always something new that we're picking on that we don't like about ourselves. What is important is your own perception of your own body, your own self-worth, your own acceptance of your body and all its perfect imperfections. We're not meant to be perfect human beings. We're meant to have different body shapes. That's what makes us individually us, and that's what makes us beautiful. So embrace what you've got. Just remember, there's always some athletic build girl out there who wants your wider hips. It's just always a case of the grass is greener. We always want what we can't have. And the sooner that you can start to accept your own body and all its flaws, not that hip dips is a flaw at all, the happier you're gonna be. And so instead of nitpicking at this little thing that you don't like, why don't you instead start focusing on what you do like about it? So the fact that you have hip dips means that you naturally have wider hips, which means you naturally have a curvier body. Wider hips is seen as attractive to many, many people out there, and that's something to be celebrated. Not to take away from my narrow-hipped girlfriends out there, because you're just as beautiful too. But all I'm trying to say is embrace what you've got and actually start to love what you have. Look at your body from a different point of view and start seeing your body not for nitpicking at its things that you don't like, but overall the things that you do like, and focus on them instead. Trust me, you'll be much happier in the long run, and you'll get to your goals faster if you just focus on the things that you like about yourself rather than nitpicking at the things that you don't. Anyway, that's enough for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if there are any other body parts that you feel insecure about or want to target, I'd love to do another full workout video for you guys, so please comment below, and I'll catch you very soon in another video.